We're going into our final panel discussion around digitalization. And here we're going to be speaking about e-government, moving government towards the digital platforms. And I want to invite Minister Marsha Cadell to the stage, as well as Mr. Aldwin Wayne, who's the CEO of WePay. Yeah. And I'm going to moderate this one. Okay. I think we've had some really great discussions so far. But now we've come to speak about I think we're getting into the meat of the matter, really around digital transformation for governments. Let me just relate to you a story that I know. This could be personal. I know someone who wants to renew their passport. The passport they renewed only 5 years ago. They must now renew it again. In order to do so, they've heard that there are long lines at the passport office. So it might be better for them to go to a more rural location to renew their passport. When I think about a story like that, it frustrates me. It reminds me of a presentation that I heard from Mr. Michael Leachin, who's the chairman of the Economic Growth Council in Jamaica. And he said at that presentation, every time the Economic Growth Council met, he encouraged members of that Growth Council to get angry. Angry about why is Jamaica where it is now and how are we going to move forward. I think for most of us in the room now, I think we're getting to that point of frustration. Why is it that our governments are not moving in the direction? Why is it that, for example, our colleagues in Malaysia can take just 1 hour to renew their passport, while this individual now in our Caribbean states has to go to a more rural location in order to do that? And then they're lucky if they get back that passport within a week or two. So, Mr. Cadell, I know that you are leading the charge around digitalization of the Barbados government services. You want to share with us what's the overall objective of your mission?
Thank you, Justin. Well, first let me say that I think when it comes to the role of government in this area, it's twofold. One is to create the environment for digital transformation of the country and the economy, and the other is to become, as government, in the provision of services ourselves, digital by default. So I think, it is on the one hand about how we diversify our economy, again, as we were saying yesterday, towards one that is less about your physical location and being a physical presence, because that constrains you for reasons that have to do with climate resilience and others. But the other is about how we change the way that we do things as government. And the first part of that is that we have to take ourselves less seriously as government. I think that governments have had a very big role in doing things in economies and in countries, and that we have to see ourselves more as a facilitator of what happens in countries. We have to see ourselves as service providers. We provide services, and we're supposed to create the environment for people to get things done. So I think that that's a shift that has started to happen. For example, in Barbados, and perhaps it has something to do with having slightly younger leadership in general. But I know that in Barbados, for example, in cabinet, we don't use paper in cabinet. We have a secure network where we access cabinet papers, and everything is on a tablet. And even in my ministry with my team, every now and then they'll say, "We send it to you," and I'll pick up my phone and say, "What? I don't see it." Because if it was sent on a file, chances are, well, that's not the kind of thing I'm looking for. So I think digital by default has been the approach, and it's not just because we want to be digital. It's because we are going back to first principles. why is it that we are doing what we do? So what is the good that we're trying to provide? What is the point of it? Or what is the public mischief that we're trying to avoid? And that goes beyond the digital approach. It goes really to our approach to everything that we do. And that's why you've seen such sweeping reforms with respect to our Planning and Development Act that we just passed in January, because really we're looking to see how we can apply digitalization and technologies to make things easier, to save time, to become more efficient, to make people's lives easier, because that is going to get us closer to our goals of inclusiveness and equality. So that is the purpose. And as we go on, I'll share some of the examples and where we think that we've made some strides, or perhaps where we think that we need to accelerate.
Okay. Thank you, Minister Cadell. Sounds good. Let's hope it pans out that way. But Aldwin, you're based here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm probably putting you on the spot here. I know you don't work in government. You're an entrepreneur.
Right.
But how do you see things panning out here in Trinidad?
So I actually agree with the Minister 100%. In Trinidad, the government acts as a facilitator for our solution. So I'll give you a little story about how we got into government and e-payments in Trinidad. So if you looked at the first panel between Gabby and Professor, it kind of displayed exactly what is happening across the Caribbean. You have a set of innovators, trying to take one direction, and you have government saying, hang on, we think this is a better direction for you to take. So what we did in Trinidad was observe, the trend, and say, let's come right down the middle. Let's work with what the government would accept as, par for the course, but still innovate. So we had a situation where the judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, they wanted to streamline payments into court, right here. They invited financial institutions because the amount of money to manage was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So they expected was companies or people to manage that would have been a financial institution. However, when they look at the solutions that banks and these companies had to provide, it wasn't focused to the unbanked. So how could we get into something like this if we're not a financial institution? We said we would run on the rails of our financial institutions, so we make Professor and those types happy. And we would create a digital solution that would make the unbanked happy, because the unbanked had no need or did not want to go to a bank to set up an account. Right? In the case of the judiciary, a lot of the clients weren't able to meet the requirements for opening a new bank account. Right? But in the case of court payments, it doesn't matter if you have a bank account or not, you need to make the payment, right? So we looked at the market, being in the space for the last 5 years in Jamaica, looking at mobile payments and trying to figure out why it's not working. We saw NCBJ, as you mentioned, Michael, went out to M-Pesa and brought in developers to make a Quisk in Jamaica, but had relatively low success. And their approach was built on the African's approach. In Africa, M-Pesa worked because the availability of a ATM or a bank was non-existent. You had to travel hundreds of miles. In the Caribbean, although we have a large unbanked population, it's not because a bank was hard to find. It was a matter of it was just difficult, or a choice. We didn't want to have to go and give our time to provide all this KYC information or get all these documents that was required. So it was a matter of choice for Caribbean people not to have a bank account, rather than limited by geography, which is what caused M-Pesa to be successful. So seeing that, that failure, we looked at what was successful for the unbanked and top-ups, phone card top-ups, which exist since the early 2000s, is how us in the Caribbean digitize our money. We will take our cash, go to a location, get a phone card top-up, and enter it into our phone. We just digitize our cash. So looking at our culture, we found a way to have the unbanked interact with an application that would form inclusion for their services. Right. So we built a platform that's exactly like the phone card network that allows you to go and buy a phone card top-up but make payments to the judiciary. So that solution is what enabled us to find success with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, right, because we provided a solution that was geared towards the customer. We could bring down Bitcoin and Alpha Coin and Omnicoin. It doesn't resonate with the doubles vendor. It doesn't resonate with the guy that has a pop-up shop in a corner. The only thing he understands is cash. But how do we digitize cash for government services? Was find a solution that he currently understands. So the learning curve for our product was for anyone who has a prepaid phone, which if you do any of the research, between Digicel and Flow, that's 90%. Everyone has a prepaid phone. Everyone knows how to top up. So we get our technology around the customer rather than build a solution and tell government this is how it had to be. So when we walked into the judiciary with a solution that the customer liked, it was easy for government to put regulations in place around a solution that they saw 10, 20,000 people, 20,000 customers walking with.
So thanks for that, because it sounds like a very interesting private-public partnership. And also a good use of data to help you to come to the right solution. Mr. Cadell, in your approach of digitalizing government, are you looking at the data? Are you trying to ensure that whatever you do will also be inclusive?
Well, we have to. We are talking about making it easier for every service or every part of government to be accessible to everyone. So by default, we have to be inclusive. And I have to emphasize that this is less about moving to digitalization because that in itself is good, but it is about how we are making sure that we are including everyone. So I'll give you an example. And it is also a huge part of our doing business environment. One of the reasons that in June last year we started with the town and country planning process is that we looked at the process and we realized that in fact a lot of these solutions would be technology solutions. So it's not that we started off by saying, well, we want to digitalize government, but we looked at what we were doing and we thought in order to deliver this in a more efficient way, we would have to make it accessible online. So we created this e-planning platform. The e-planning platform allows people to make their applications online, but it also allows us, between the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, the Town and Country Planning Office, Coastal Zone Management Unit, and all the other agencies that have to make a decision on the application to speak to each other. Because what was happening before is that a file would have to leave Warren's, and one would have to go to Bay Street, and another would have to go to 10 different locations for officers to sit down and look at files, and then a messenger would have to take a file. I mean, when you sit down in a first principles process and ask questions about what every process that is completed and why, then you start to realize, but hang on, this is a lot of time that we're wasting. This is a lot of money that we're spending. And not only that, we talked in the lecture a couple nights ago about the idea of displacement of labor. But it's also, this is a resource that is not being optimized. And that's what we're doing through our modernization project now, that we're pleased to have the IDB supporting us with, is that one of the things we're looking at is how do we also use this process to change the structure of work and to redeploy resources so that you may not be sitting stamping a set of plans for town planning because there was somebody doing that. But you, in fact, might be moved to a process that is more efficient so that you're not necessarily removed from work, but that what we're helping to do is to help upskill some of those workers to make sure that they are part of a new digital environment. So it's what we're finding, whether it's town planning, whether it's corporate registry, whether it's getting liquor licenses online, crop over is coming. And we have a lot of promoters who are frustrated all the time because to hold a simple fete, to hold a fish fry, to hold anything, you have to go and get police permission for that. You have to get a liquor license. You have to get permission from, you know, the body that deals with our artists and permission to play music and copyright and so on. And what we've said is, listen, we need a one-stop shop for many of these things. Right. But it is about how we use the digitalization process, digitalization of government, to modernize. We call our project a modernization project because it gives us the opportunity to look at, well, these people who were stamping things and doing this very analog system, how can we invest in them to make sure that they are part of a new digital economy? So it goes to the point Avi was making earlier about the fact that this is not just about building platforms, which are important, and I love the approach of the private sector in Trinidad, which is saying, let me build something that we can show you the usefulness of. Right. And we would love for the private sector to do that in the context of government services. But it's not just about creating platforms or what the platform is. It is that this process allows governments to modernize everything that we do. It allows us to find applicability across a range of sectors. And it is really the transformation that will push us in the right direction, because it starts to open up all the other questions of labor and human resources, of how we're getting value added across sectors. And you know, the word that is behind us at the top of the screen, that is what we're talking about. It's not just digital transformation, it's transformation writ large across our economies.
Okay. So it seems as if digitalization is, we shouldn't see it as a threat. There's a lot of opportunities there for us, and I agree with that analysis. Now, if we all know that digitalization holds so much promise for us, Aldwin, you're working across the region. If I look at the screen here, the questions that are being asked, are our governments really serious about this? Are they digitalizing fast enough?
Well, make sure who's here. Yes. No. The thing is, I think innovators, I mean, I just had a conversation with Gabby before we start. We're missing the boat. Trinidad, the Caribbean, our culture is slightly different, you know, from the rest of the world. Our government, you know, belongs to this culture. So we can't walk in here with, you know, I mean, a new technology and expect them to say, oh, that's fantastic, we're going to implement it. We need to take baby steps with government, no offense.
I don't agree.
You walk in and you present something that they are comfortable with. And this is what we did. Again, this is how we were successful. We didn't come in and say, listen, we have this brand new, you know, digital fiat that's going to revolutionize Trinidad. We walked in and said, listen, we could do online payments with bank instruments, credit card payments, but, you know, we're going to leave a huge sector of our population, you know, disenfranchised, you know, 80% who doesn't have credit cards. So we came up with a solution that, since we are, you know, regulated by, you know, Visa and MasterCard as a pay fact, we built our solution on that same rails for the digital fiat, the cash. And we presented that as an option. So it was small bites, small chunks, to allow government to chew on and understand that what we're coming with is a solution that the unbanked might be able to use. We didn't come across with, wholesale changes, which is just small amounts that they will be able to change within their current government capacity. We had the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago amend a couple of laws to allow our solution to function, which was easily digested by both the government and the opposition. So it received the votes to move forward. It wasn't a wholesale change. So these incremental steps towards the end game of total digitization would allow for governments to give innovators like myself the environment to innovate, to get in place.
Well, Aldwin, when I listen to Gabriel Abed, Kirk Anthony Hamilton, they're, I think, within your age cohort as well. They are suggesting to us that we can't move along at that pace anymore. The incremental steps are not going to be fast enough for us.
For sure.
And when you say it's our culture, I somehow feel it might be more than just culture that's preventing us from moving forward. So there might be special interests as well.
For sure.
Minister, how are you going to deal with this? Because it sounds to me that you really want to move Barbados forward, and I don't think you want to do it in incremental steps.
Not at all. In fact, I don't know what's happening here in Trinidad and Tobago, but I will have to say that in Barbados we are ready for wide-scale transformation. We are policymakers. If there's something that we need to do to transform our economy and society, we are able to make the legislative changes. Some of it, I agree, has to be based on consultation with our people. And so some of the slower steps might not be about government, but might be about bringing everyone along, because we are talking about entire populations and that you have to engage, you have to speak with. But certainly, we are the legislators. So for example, we had to bring a new data protection act to govern a lot of what we are doing on the digitalization and modernization side. Who gets to look at this information once we've created this platform that makes data move seamlessly between agencies? Who gets to access it? Under what conditions can it be shared? And we've already gone with that new legislation. We had to bring new legislation for planning and development. We are going to have to bring new legislation in terms of our statistical act. So we, in fact, in the last year, have brought significant legislation that has allowed us to change the way that we interact as government with the population and interact with each other. So I would say to the private sector, and I saw a question there, I'm preempting your role a little bit, Justin, but the questions are fantastic. I saw a question there about how is government going to move towards this modernized digital environment, given the fact that we have these fiscal constraints. Yes. And really, it is going to be about partnership with the private sector. So don't hold back.
So I just want to jump in so I can clarify my incremental point.
Good, okay.
So we launched the system with government in, I think it was August last year. And within August to December, we actually had 2 laws amended. So I may mention incremental, but that's for the government to consume what we're saying. 2 laws amended within 6 months. That's, well, in Trinidad anyway, that's aggressive. But how we were enabled, or how we were allowed to have that happen, is we provided a solution that they could understand, and then results that he could see. Right. So in October, we had the payment to the courts, which was the act that was amended for our solution. And then in December, when they were passing the Financial Act of 2018, they amended what payments into government and the title of a collector was, which included our type of service. So the only reason I mentioned the incremental approach was to bridge the gap between Avi and Mr. Prasad, sorry, and Professor Prasad, and Gabriel. So, we don't go back and forth, on stages like this,
Right.
because this was happening in Trinidad.
Yes.
Months after months saying, hey, we need to do this, and this one saying, okay, let's do it. No, you can't do it, and you spend months just arguing the same point. We said, listen, government, we're just going to do just one little change. Okay, we accept that. And then 1 month later, one more change. Okay, we accept that. And then within 2 months or 4 months, we have an entire law changed.
Yes.
And that's our approach. Again,
good.
incremental for government in Trinidad. In Barbados, it seems like you're more aggressive, so maybe I should come across to Barbados.
I'm happy that you clarified that. I'm sure my Trinidad and Tobago colleagues in the room are happy to hear that as well. I see the numbers are red on the screen here. I just want to ask you one final question for both of you. It was the question was up earlier around a unique digital ID system. At the William Demas lecture on Tuesday, Estonians utilized this system very effectively to make transactions seamless throughout the economy, throughout the society. We saw recently that in Jamaica, we had a bit of a hiccup, and so the government has to go back to the drawing board. Do you see utility of us moving towards such a system? And even as Gabriel Abed has said, why can't we not do this at a regional level instead of now trying to only come up with national systems? Is it possible?
It's definitely possible. I mean, in Barbados, we are moving towards the model that was presented during the lecture. Now, we have to make sure that that the model that we do adopt, that is adapted to what we need to do. But as was said, I think that we already have the platform, the idea of having a national identifier. I think that people are already comfortable with that idea. And people also want, as Therese said earlier, people want to be able to live their lives on their phones. I do. So people want to be able to access key services and also want to be able to trust that their information is secure. And that is the role that government can play. The role of trust is the role for government. So to make sure, and that can't be kind of delegated to the private sector. We have to make sure that we set up in terms of legislation and regulation, for people to know that their data is safe. Mm-hmm. But I think that the point about having this facilitated at the regional level is important. If we look at how we operate as the CSME, the issues of contingent rights, issues of social security and insurance and being able to move your rights across borders, it's going to become important. But I do think that we first have a commitment to our citizens to be able to do this at a national level, to be able to demonstrate its usefulness. For example, and I mean this has application across so many things. You talked about the payments within the court system, and how our courts are able to provide services for citizens. We're talking about things like transfers between custodial parents and non-custodial parents that have for decades been a challenge. So how are we able to make sure that those payments are made easily? And how are we also able to remove discretion from government decision making? This is one of the key things that digitalization allows us to do. The more we can automate some of the things that we know we want to do. So what are the reasons that we say no? And this is something that Avi and I have been working on a lot in terms of modernization across the board, with our fiscal incentives.
Right.
We have these systems where we expect that we're going to say no. And so we set up ourselves to say no rather than to say yes. But if we use this process to say, listen, there are a very narrow set of circumstances in which the answer is going to be no, in which you're going to have to stop the process and a person is going to have to step in and review this thing. this gives us an opportunity to be able to remove this kind of, and you talked about the role of interest groups earlier, remove this kind of discretionary approach to decision making, because there's a certain automaticity to how things are done. So for example, with the fiscal incentives framework, we know that if you present these certain criteria, that we can get you to a yes in 5 days.
Right.
So rather than having all of these people come and want to sit with us and ask for special considerations, if you fulfill certain criteria, we can guarantee you'll have if it's a yes, you'll have it within 5 days.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of value that investors are going to prioritize. That's the kind of value that citizens are going to want to have from these automated, digitalized processes. And so we think that once people start to have confidence in the benefits, that the trust is going to come and people are going to be open to having this idea of unique identifiers and having information flow seamlessly across agencies.
Alderman, finally, over to you. What do you think about this?
So yeah, I think Gabby is spot on with this. We, as English-speaking Caribbeans, we're just about 10 million people. The value in any solution is the value you can provide to the people that has to use it. And there's no sense in creating a solution in Trinidad, and we have the single Caribbean market, and I can't use it in Barbados, or Jamaica, or St. Lucia, or Guyana, for that matter. So yes, we are spread out a large geographical location, but we are still very small in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
So if we're developing a system, as Gabby keeps saying, it should be able to spread across the region and provide value to all Caribbean people. That's the power that I think with his platform that he's trying to get at. As a Caribbean unit, we now have bargaining power with the US and all the rest of the world. But we need to start working together. We need to have this one platform, not payments, I'm talking about affecting digital solutions across the region, whether it be a unified identification program. So my ID card, if I go to Barbados tomorrow, could bring up all my information in Trinidad so I can start a business tomorrow, because it's verified by a system in Trinidad that you in Barbados would accept. It would only improve the lives of the entire Caribbean. So for government, for the Caribbean on the whole, I think the approach has to be a Caribbean-wide one.
Well, I want to thank both of you for sharing your perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please give them a round of applause?